Today we're going to talk about harvesting transistors for whatever you may want to use them for. I usually use them for guitar pedals and stuff. So all I did was, if you keep an eye out, you can usually find radios or old stereos or whatever, late 60s, early 70s, that people are throwing out. So I grab them and pull out the circuit board, take a look at the circuit board, see if there's stuff on it, pull out the circuit board, and then I have all kinds of old carbon comp resistors, which I know are very old technology. Most of the capacitors are useless because the values drift. Or if they're like electrolytic, they dry out or whatever. And things like pots and stuff don't really have a lot of mojo. But you can find a lot of really neat little tiny, I don't know if you can see that little tiny black transistor there. A couple of them on here, there's like 3 or 4 on this little board. There's a bunch of transistors on this board here. A little hard to see. Looks like a black one in here. There's a couple metal can little type ones there. I've gotten all kinds of really cool old silicone and germanium transistors. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and I have other boards with all different kinds of transistors on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out one of these transistors. So, I don't know which one. I'm going to go with one of these little metal can ones. They look kind of interesting. So luckily on a lot of these old ones, since they weren't maybe automated, the boards, they're actually printed with like C39, R42, R5, R7, with the resistors in Q8 is a transistor right here. So I'm going to pull this transistor, okay, and if I flip over to the back, okay, it actually shows me it has them printed again. So like R52, R51, R48, it has the transistors, and it even says E, B, and C on the transistors. So that makes it really nice and easy. And it has a little 8 in a circle, so I know exactly which one it is. Okay, so I don't know if you can see this. Okay, so I'm going to use some little solder wick. Okay, my son for Boy Scouts had to do a thing, and they got a little kit, and it came with this piece of solder wick. And I don't know if you can see, but the solder just kind of balled up on it. It did not lift solder very well at all. So it's really totally useless, this piece. Okay, so what we did was we used my solder wick, and if you can see, there's no big balls of solder. It sucked right up into the wick. Okay, so I'm going to remove one. Okay, and what you want to do is you lay the wick over the solder, press down on the wick, pressing down into the solder. Okay, and yes, I know my soldering iron is terrible. It's old and cruddy. Okay, I think I did it. So it's as simple as that. And that's the solder right there that just came out. I don't know if you can see that. Okay, so that one. Pull out this one. Okay, and I like to wait a minute between, just so that you're not overheating the transistor too much. Okay, and usually when you're harvesting these, you can't really get a heat sink in on the legs because the legs are just tiny. But what are you going to do, right? Okay, so let me see how loose this is. Q8. Okay, and obviously I don't have to tell you that the soldering iron is super hot, so you want to be very, very careful with it. You don't want to hold the solder wick too close. So if I'm soldering, if I'm trying to lift solder here, I don't want to hold it right there because the solder wick obviously heats up. Okay, so let's see. Okay, it is definitely coming out. Okay, you don't want to apply too much heat. Like I said, you don't want to heat up the transistor any more than needed. A little tiny bit more right on the side of this leg. I know my arm's in the way and you can't see what's going on. I'm just removing solder. Okay, so let's see. Okay, I'm going to have to come back. I'm just going to get needle nose pliers and grab the transistor gently and pull. I might have to heat a tiny bit of solder on the leg that's still stuck, but if I'm holding it with the needle nose pliers and kind of pulling and soldering from the other end, as soon as that solder melts, it'll go boop and come right out. So I'll be right back. What ended up happening was when I flipped the circuit board, I was trying to see where the three legs were, and sometimes it's hard to like flip and try to think of like a mirror image. So I desoldered one of the wrong lugs. I desoldered a little, not even a lug, the little leg from a resistor that was next to it on the opposite side. So when I did that, I desoldered the correct leg and boop, it just popped right out. So I made a note. I drew a little picture of the bottom. It has this little tab, like a little rectangle sticking out on the bottom of the transistor. I drew a little picture and wrote from the board what the emitter, the collector, and the base were. So then it's really simple. You use a little multimeter with a transistor tester, an HFE thingy, and you pop it in and you get 193, 192, 193. So there we are. So that's the fun part, finding out what the gain is on them. So 192, 192 HFE. And that's how you harvest transistors for whatever kind of pedal you might want. So I have a whole bunch of transistors with them written down and things. NPN transistor with a gain of 98, an NPN with a gain of 30, a PNP germanium with a gain of 89, a PNP germanium with a gain of 30, gain of 80, gain of 100. Here's one is 68. You know, so one with a gain of 68, and this doesn't even have any markings that I can read on the packaging at all. But I know that it's a PNP, and I know that the gain on it is 68. That does not account for leakage, but nonetheless it gives me a ballpark of where I am. So if it registers a gain of 68, I know that it's well within the range for like fuzz pedals or things like that. So that's about it. So hopefully this helped somebody.